My parents died in a car crash when I was 14. Don't feel bad for me or anything, I've made my peace with that years ago. Life with them was never great, but I do miss them. It's just that if they taught me one thing, it's to not sit around wallowing in self-pity. I just wish they hadn't sent me to live with my Aunt Lois. Anyone have that one family member that's just a little strange, a little cut off from the rest of the family? My Aunt Lois was ours. She was also our closest living relative. Dad's family lived on the other side of the continent. Mom's parents were both dead and she was an only child. Aunt Lois, her mother's sister, actually. So my great aunt lived just an hour to where we lived. When my folks were alive, they rarely visited Aunt Lois, and to be perfectly honest, I have expected her to refuse to take me in. I was fully prepared to become a ward of the state, or move across the country as soon as I heard that Children and Family Services had contacted her and taken me in. But she accepted. And not sure how willingly or graciously, because I wasn't privy of the phone conversation when she agreed to take me. I was surprised though, and how nice she was to me the first 3 days I was there. I wanted to make something clear. While Aunt Lois was cranky, old, eccentric, uncouth, and several other less than flattering adjectives, she wasn't a complete bitch. She had a rather abrupt, even abrasive way of speaking, but she wasn't cruel. I had never taken the time of really getting to know her during my initial 14 years. But I could tell that she mostly kept to herself and didn't particularly like people, so naturally, I assumed that she was a reclusive, curmudgeonly bitch. Really, what surprised me the most was when I first moved in and how normal everything seemed. At least at first. Aunt Lois was cooking, cleaning, watching TV, talking to the neighbors on the phone, etc. Just like anyone else would. And she told me right away that she had a little in a way of expectations for me. Or at least, none that my parents would have had. I don't stay out too late. Let her know if I'm going to be late coming home. Finish your homework before you watch TV. Clean up after yourself, etc. There was one rule, however, that was strange. And it stood out from the other rules on how strange it was. At first, I tried not to worry about it. Old people sometimes have peculiarities. I initially thought that was all it was. I was wrong. She insisted that at any time I entered or left a room, I was to shut the door behind me right away. It didn't matter if I was only going to be in the room for a few seconds. If I entered the room, I was expected to immediately shut the door. And the same was true if I left it. I often forgot this rule in my first week or so there. She never failed to remind me of it. "Shut the damn door!" she would yell. Anytime I forgot, it never seemed to matter where she was in the house. She could always tell when I had not shut the door after just opening it. Her house was old, and my understanding is that she was not the first owner. She had lived in it since Mom was a girl. I had no idea how old it was. It could easily have been 100 judging by the design and layout. It had 2 floors, a basement and a sub-basement. The last floor threw me a bit off the loop when I discovered it existed. I was washing a load of clothes when I noticed the door, closed naturally, in the far wall of the utility room. basement was unfinished, with mostly dirt flooring and bits of bobs stacked or piled and shelved everywhere. The only room you could really walk through without fear of stepping on something or knocking over a stack of pile was this laundry room, which was also the only tiled floor down here. The door found in the basement had a board nailed across it, easily movable. It was as if Aunt Lois wanted a boarder there, but no one that she could get past. It need be. My curiosity overtook me the second time I saw it, and I slid the board away from the door and tried it. It was locked. It didn't strike me in the strangest way possible. That is, until I realized that it's the only room in the house, other than the doors leading outside, Aunt Lois kept locked. I asked her about it one day. She was cooking. "The door in the basement?" she answered. "That's the sub-basement. Not much down there. I mainly keep my preserves down there. It's cool enough for them to keep." "Right," I answered. This didn't really explain why she kept it locked. "So, if I ever wanted to take a look down there..." "For the love of Christ, boy, why would you want to do that?" I noticed, with that response, that her face had changed. Aunt Lois mostly wore the same expression. A scowl, like someone had just tracked mud on a freshly shampooed carpet. Again, she wasn't as nasty as her expression indicated, but it was an expression she was most used to making, apparently. But when she responded to my desire to see what was behind that door, her eyebrows raised and her mouth quivered for just a second before answering. It was so slight, others might not have noticed it, but by the time I knew enough about Aunt Lois to indicate that was a scream of horror. I knew then that I had to see what was behind that door. I've always been the curious type, you see. Never been able to stay away from something that aroused my curiosity. Even if my good sense told me better, I wanted nothing more than to see what was in the sub-basement. But how was I gonna get around the lock? That was going to be an issue. Aunt Lois kept all her keys on a single ring. There weren't many of them, but I figured if the door to the sub-basement was anywhere, it was there. I just had to figure out a way to take it from her. This turned out to be not that simple. For one thing, it was not impossible to get around the house without being heard. It was impossible. I could sneak from my bedroom to hers in order to sneak the keys without opening and closing all doors in between us, mine, the doors in the far part of the hallway, and hers. Believe me, even if I simply left all doors open, she somehow knew. I once had to go to the bathroom in the night, and I forgot to close the hallway door. I just made it to the bathroom when I heard her yell, even while asleep, "Shut that damn door!" I hurriedly turned back and went to close the halfway door, forgetting to close the bathroom door, and then I heard it again, "Shut that damn door!" For that matter, Aunt Lois' room had a squeaky door that also had a catch to it. So when she opened it, it sounded like a that was no opening to her door without her noticing. So I forgot about the sub-basement door for a while. I placed my curiosity on the back burner and just tried to get along with the tactarium old woman for a while. Life got a bit easier as long as I remembered to keep all the doors shut at all times. The two of us got along famously. She didn't get in my face about things, and I didn't get in hers. It was a pretty solid house, but one that I got used to living in. I didn't even think it strange anymore that every part of the house had one access through a door. Always had a door shut. It would have struck me as more odd if the doorway was ever left open. Which brings me to the day Aunt Lois fell asleep while watching The Price is Right. It was a summer day, pretty hot. Lewis has slightly less worried about windows being open than doors, and she still tended to only open one at a time. And today she was just one open, one that wasn't doing much to cool down the boxed-in house that had zero room for airflow thanks to Aunt Lewis's chief eccentricity. Now naturally she fell asleep, and I saw my chance. Her purse was at her feet. I was sitting in a chair directly beside hers, reading the Avengers comic book and trying to ignore her repeating calls of "Come on down" from the TV. I looked over at her and saw that she was in a deep doze. Her hearing wasn't the greatest even when she was awake, though she was far from deaf. But I figured in her snooze there was something, though there would be a little chance she would hear a tiny noise from me rifting through the purse. I found her keys almost immediately and headed for the stairwell. If she woke up when I opened the door, I would just claim I was doing some little laundry. But she was unlikely to wake up unless I forgot to close the door, which I now never did. I headed down the stairs and for some reason tiptoed even though I wasn't ready yet in place to be shut down from. I felt absurdly guilty despite the fact that Aunt Lewis had never really forbidden me from doing what I was doing. The door to the basement was closed, of course, but unlocked. As always, I ducked through and closed it, waiting a few minutes, listening to the shifting of Aunt Lewis's frame in her chair, indicating she was getting up, or perhaps her voice called to ask why I was in the basement. Quietly, I crept for the laundry room, opened the door, and closed it just as quick. Looked inside, I felt for a chain pull for the light and pulled it. A low, eerie light flickered through the room. I never thought of the light in here as eerie before, but I did now. There was something about this eerie endeavor that felt wrong. But my curiosity overrode my sense of caution. I crept towards the door and slid the board away from it. Aunt Lewis had apparently put it back in place, and after the last time I had done this, the question is why she had done so played in my brain for a moment. But I ignored it and brushed it out of the key ring. I found the right key on the third try and heard a loud shock of the lock sliding away. I froze, heart beating in my chest, waiting to hear a cry from upstairs. Nothing. The door opened silently as a ghost there with a mini light to illuminate the staircase beyond. I didn't even see a chain pull from the light of the stairs. My brain was screaming at the rest of my body to turn around and forget this little adventure, but I paid it no heed and crept down the stairs, feeling along the wall for guidance. It turned out there was a little amount of light coming through the fence of the ceiling. It wasn't much, but I could see that there was a pull string light just a few feet from the foot of the stairs. Stupid place to put it. It would be right at the landing, but I walked down and it appeared to be a fairly compacted hallway as a pulled string. If possible, the light that flickered on was low in the light in the laundry room. I could barely tell I turned it on. I looked around and saw that indeed Aunt Lewis did have rows of preserves down here. I was somewhat disappointed at the contained answer of the mystery. For a moment, it seemed that this secret sub-basement was exactly what it was supposed to be. Except I could feel a puff of warm breeze that should not be down here in a packed earthen walls of cooler subterranean air. A sense of wrongness was still there, still strong, and I realized that the long rows of shelves holding jars ended in the doorway at the end. The doorway that didn't have a door. I crept forward, arms in front of me, Stepping carefully, the room beyond the door was dark and smelled musty. I couldn't tell the source of the light, slightly warm air that was brushing against my skin. I was noticing that the closer I got to the room, the warmer the air became. By the time I was in the mouth of the tunnel somehow I was standing and thinking in places I turned. By the time the air wasn't just warm, it was humid, fetid. The smell went from musty to moldy and something even worse. I was assaulted by the sense of wrongness stronger than ever, and I had to get out of here. Why was I walking even closer? There wasn't much light, but I could see the outline of another door by the side of the room. It was ajar. Seeing the door ajar in Aunt Lucy's house must have been like seeing a shattered window in someone else's. It was wrong. It was not meant to be, but then I wasn't precisely in Aunt Lucy's house anymore, was I? This tunnel was not built for this house. I knew that in my soul. But it was here before, long before, and it was a place that had only become attached to Aunt Lois's house in the short-sighted building. Short-sighted builders, unaware that they had unearthed what they should have left buried. It took me a lot more to realize that the room beyond, the very room I was about to step into, was moving. The light was too dim to really see what happened, and there was a motion beyond it, uneasy, slow, hazy motion. All on the walls, the floor, I could hear slight scratching noises from every corner. Things were crawling, expanding their purplish flesh, and looking at me, daring to cross the floor and shut the door from the far side, forever closing what might be coming through it. I heard sucking sounds, some formless, geneless presence stretching out and flexed in darkness. In that moment, a sense of understanding came to me. I was not the first person to stand at this door that could not be closed, the first person to see that other door, the one that was not meant to be, standing open on the other side, knowing that it always would, until someone took the courage to cross the threshold and close it. Aunt Lois had not had that courage, and so she fled and kept every door in her house closed at all times, hoping against hope that her doors closed at all times would alert her when something beyond that damn door finally came for her. I didn't have that courage either. I turned and fled and never looked back. When I was 16, I moved out of Aunt Lois's into a halfway house. Once I was 18, I got a job upstate and moved there. I never went back to Aunt Lois's and never called her. Tried hard to not even think about her. But I hadn't been successful. I still think about it to this day. That I stood in the doorway at the squelch wriggle things and waited in the dark. And I wonder if Aunt Lois ever found the strength to cross the room and shut that damned door.